I have the pleasure of introducing our lunch keynote speaker, Johnpaul Jones. Johnpaul Jones has an accomplished 40-year career as an architect and founding partner of Jones & Jones Architect, landscape architects and planners. Johnpaul's portfolio includes national museums and memorials, native cultural centers, parks, zoological and botanical gardens, and environmental education centers, including the Smithsonian National Museum of Native American in Washington, D.C. He also has work here in Alaska that he might talk a little bit about during his presentation. His designs have won widespread acclaim for their reverence for the earth, respect for local architectural traditions and landscapes, and for heightening understanding of indigenous people and cultures in America. Johnpaul is a fellow in the American Institute of Architects and has won a stream of local, state, and national awards. Most recently, the National Humanities Medal for the National Endowment for the Humanities, conferred by President Obama. If you could all help me in welcoming Johnpaul, thank you.
Okay. There we go. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. And speaking at lunchtimes is always difficult because everybody's trying to socialize and eat, but I'll try to get your attention. And see this photograph of this Alaska Native fella? It was in Alaska Airline magazine. You're going to see a lot of Native people like him active in the rural communities. There's an energy going on right now in Native communities throughout North America and here in Alaska. And I thought this picture was a good start for the talk I'm going to say today. And it's not so much about design as it is about emerging gifts. And let's see if I can move us forward a little bit. I attended some of the sessions, and it was really great to, I just attended the one on solar. I mean, who knew Alaska had solar potential? That's terrific. And you know, there was words like fuel consumption mentioned in some of the conference areas, and then air quality emission and the best practices of energy development and energy assessment and planning. And along with that, the Rural Energy Conference has a mission statement that maybe not all of you have seen yet, and it was to create a forum for energy stakeholders to share ideas and information with a goal for promoting economic development, environmental sustainability, and energy security for rural Alaskans. Now, you know, probably 90% of rural Alaskans are Native people. And they live in those villages where you're trying to provide you know, energy and sustainable energy for people in those villages. But I'd like to talk about something different but related to this mission statement, and it's about emerging gifts. And I'd like to shed just a little bit of light on something that might be helpful in your working with Native people in these rural Alaska villages. And I've divided it into 3 parts. And I'll get to those 3 parts in a minute, but the 3 parts are ancient gifts from indigenous people who have lived here in Alaska and North America for a long, long, long time. So ancient gifts. The second one is verbal gifts. that are passed down from generation to generation to generation. Verbal gifts. And then the last one is this emerging gifts that's happening right now. Look at the energy of this Native kids singing here. That's what's going on in the villages. Their culture hasn't gone away, but it's reviving strongly right now. And energy, sustainability are part of their cultural heritage. And so the last one is this emerging gifts, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And but before I begin, all these pictures were in the Alaska Airline magazine, and they're terrific pictures. But before I begin, I'd like to talk about something that would be good for you to understand about North American and Alaska Native people. Just a little introduction. Okay, number one, we are a diverse people. That's a key word, diverse. We are not just Native Americans living in teepees, chasing buffalo, and we're not what you see on television. This is Donna House. She's a Navajo botanist, and she was on a construction project that looked after the sustainable landscape in the mall in Washington, D.C. The first time on the mall in Washington, D.C., they'd ever had a sustainable landscape. And we don't all live in tribal reservations and homelands or in isolated villages. Chilies. And without our indigenous ancestors here in North America and our relatives in Central and South America, there would be no hot salsa. And there would be no corn chips. There would be no tomatoes like you just had on your pasta. No tomato sauce. And we wouldn't have pumpkins at Halloween, or French fries with your Big Mac. And it's amazing what has been domesticated by Native people all over the Americas. And I estimated in my grocery store, it makes up about 50% of the food that we see in our stores that we buy. But please remember, we are a diverse Native community, and we're young and energetic. We have a lot to share, and we're very diverse. Now, the second thing, I want you to look at this picture. In the lower 48 especially, my mother's in there somewhere. We are still here, and we have survived, even though the American government has tried repeatedly to eliminate us in many different ways, in wars, relocation, difficult Native schools, and worthless training. The harm done by these attempts at assimilation are profound. My mother had to experience this terrible thing as a young girl. I'm not going to get into it really deeply, but it had affect our communities throughout North America immensely. However, look at the energy in this fellow singing. Look at the energy in that. We're still here. And we still practice what our ancestors passed on to us. And sustainability and rural energy thing, it was a critical part of that. But I just want to emphasize the energy that's taking place here in Alaska in Native communities and throughout the lower 48 is phenomenal right now. And the government wasn't successful in eliminating our indigenous ways and beliefs and practices. They just weren't possible. And we are still here throughout Alaska speaking our own languages. Let's back this up just a little bit more there. And trying to do things our own way. And we're speaking English as well as our own language. So, most of the Native people speak 2 or 3 different languages. So that's the second part. We're still here. And the third part to understand in the short thing here is we have unique ways and beliefs. That's a critical thing to understand. It comes from experience. This is interesting right here. This is if you're ever in Vancouver, Canada, at the Archaeological Museum there. The Thunderbirds helping humans come out of the clam. So we have this connection with the animal world that's pretty unique and very important. And the same artists did this canoe at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. And people call it the Black Canoe, but what it is that, look at what's in that canoe. It's full of humans and spirits and the environment and everything. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. It's a big message that's really important, and it's expressed in art. However, these unique ways and beliefs are expressed year-round, not just in art, but year-round, and not just at powwows and Indian gatherings and Native gatherings. We have a relationship with everything around us in this country. It might be good for others to know about this knowledge, these ancient ways and beliefs. They come from years and years of experience. These fellows are Hopi, and every year they go to the Grand Canyon and they renew the earth and they thank the earth. They do it every year for all of us. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty common throughout North American Native people. They want the world to continue. They don't want it to go away. That's me when I was young. So those 3 things were really important to know a little bit about Native people. So back to the ancient gifts. Since I'm an architect, I get focused on Native architecture throughout North America. And when I was in school at University of Oregon, I was the only Native architect in the School of Architecture at that time. There's some now, but there wasn't very many. And what you have to take is 2 years of the history of world architecture. Take 2 years of it, 5 days a week, just about every day. And you study mainly Europe and the ancient Greeks and the Romans and Asia and colonial America and modern America, and it was good. I learned a lot. However, it was an incomplete picture of the rich history and complex indigenous cultural architecture of North America and how they are all related to energy sustainability, every one of them. There are some magnificent ancient indigenous places and structures all over North America, here in Alaska, designed and built by, the first Americans, the first people of North America. So I'm going to test you a little bit here. Does anyone know where or what this historic illustration represents? Do you know where it is? It's not Mexico. It's not Central America. Yeah, it's Cahokia, right? Outside of St. Louis, just across the Mississippi. Everybody thought those were odd hills out in the middle of the flat grasslands. And they were these pyramids. This is in National Geographic. It's one of the national historic monuments in the country. And They're the Great Pyramids of Cahokia. And actually, that culture went all the way up the Ohio Valley and went all the way up the Mississippi into Minnesota and Wisconsin. Some magnificent things that we don't know much about. Anybody know where this is? It's in the southwest. And that at the bottom there is Pueblo Bonito. That's Chaco Canyon. It's a really famous place. It's another national monument. It's worth it whenever you're in Santa Fe to drive a couple hours over to Chaco Canyon and go there. It's all open to everybody. It's a national park, free to go see the structures there. Let's see. This is a little closer to home here in Alaska. Can anybody tell me what type of structure these fellows are singing in? Longhouse, coastal longhouse. This is a Salish coastal longhouse in Seattle. And they had rectilinear columns inside instead of round columns, which is pretty interesting. But you know, all throughout North America, and this is on the East Coast, these structures like this were all over these, sometimes 700 feet long. The whole community lived in it. And the structure was made from poles that were like about 6 inches in diameter. They were like, 30 feet high, 24 to 30 feet high, and around 30 feet wide. And they were curved at the top and then shingled. And they were great solar places. They had great ventilation that took place, and they worked. People could live there and stay healthy. They looked like a streamlined trailer court, that upper one. Yeah. But I wanted to point this out. This was a drawing done by the Spaniards that came through the area the first time. And see in the far right-hand corner down there, it says savages, okay? So these things were all built by savages. Let me back this up. It's going too fast. This exists. Like 200 people can sit in here, and air comes in along the back of this area right here, venting, goes up and goes out, and just a wonderful space. And you get 200 people in there, and you know the body heat that comes from all that. And this place is cool and comfortable because of the way it was set up for venting and gravity. Most people know about these structures. These were some of the early sustainable structures that worked in the wintertime, freezing cold winters, and they worked in the summertime. And that flap at the top, it's like a sail. You could turn it so the wind caught the wind and it pulled air up out of the space and smoke out of the space inside the teepee. So, you know, every structure, they responded to solar and seasonal orientations, equinoxes and solstice events, and often arranged around cardinal directions, and they were all built with local materials. I was doing a memorial for Native groups, the Utes in Utah, just north of Salt Lake City. And the tribe there used to come to this area and put their lodges, their teepees up in this area, and the Mormons couldn't figure out why were they there. It was the coldest place, you know, and all that. Well, what they found out later was that it's close to Yellowstone, right? And what's in Yellowstone is thermal energy. And what was in that area where they put their teepees was the ground was warmer in that area than other areas around there. And so they could get the energy from the thermal into their teepee, and then they had inside insulation that was put up, and they could live comfortably in that area there. And then they had some hot baths that were right by that they could go to. So it's pretty interesting to kind of look at these things from a sustainable point of view. And they weren't designed by savages. They were carefully arranged, both interior and exterior, to respond to real environmental conditions and the ways and beliefs of the daily lives of the people that were there. And this is the upper part of Chaco Canyon. And this one hasn't, it's a round one, and it hasn't even been restored. It's just sitting there waiting, you know. And it's full of gifts, what I call it. They're full of all kinds of ancient gifts. And believe me, this still exists. It's one of the Hopi Mesa villages. Every one of these are full of good information about the sustainable world, and they're loaded. And we're just now beginning to understand some of those ancient gifts. And I love their spirit, I love their beauty. And if you are working in a Native community project, I recommend that you spend some time and do a little research and talk to the people in the community about their views of sustainability and what that is. I think you'll find some things that'll be very helpful with your engineering and your planning for rural energy in Alaska. Now, that's one thing. Now, the second thing is verbal. You know, we're all oriented toward the written word and verbal kind of things. Well, in the Native community, the verbal part, there wasn't much writing. It was mainly verbal. And it was through storytelling. And I want to share something with you. My Choctaw mother and grandmother passed on to me many things that I found I can use in the modern world in planning and design. And they were verbal. And as a young man, they set me down between them and they told me these things. And I didn't appreciate it until I got older. And then now I use it. My firm uses it all the time in planning, design, everything we do. It's wonderful. And it's all there for us to use. And I'll go past that, kind of keep it rolling here. This is a poem by Chief Dan George. Do you know who he was? He was in a movie called Little Big Man. He's a really wonderful native fellow from the Coast Salish. And he said, "The beauty of the trees, the softness of the air, the fragrance of the grass speak to me." And you can read the rest of that down through there. And what it is that the indigenous elders throughout all Alaska and North America know every habitat. They know every habitat. The elders in the communities especially, they know the plants, they know the animals, they know the water. Water? Yeah, they know different kinds of water, and they know what it means. They know the dirt, and they know the rocks. They know the skies and the clouds and the wind, and they know the spirit of each living place. So, you know, talk to these people in the communities that you have. You'll find when you're trying to locate a place for solar panels, that community is loaded with information that they can help you with. So much of what our ancestors have left is verbal, and it's often ceremonial. And the verbal stories are the most important gifts. They come by way of songs and storytelling and poems and dancing and ceremonies. And if you're lucky to be invited to some, take advantage of it, because there's a lot that can be learned. And these stories are passed down, like I said, from generation to generation to generation. But what to remember is they come from experience. It's not just something made up. It comes from experience. And as an American Indian architect myself, involved in planning and design, I try to use what my ancestors gave me and in a daily way in what I'm doing on projects. And I wanted to just show you a little bit about what those are. And there are 4 worlds. And I'll show later on one project where we applied that here in Fairbanks. And one of them is that always look at the natural world around you, and that doesn't mean just plants. That really means the seasons and the cardinal directions and the sky and the rain, orientation, rivers and the lakes. It means a lot, not just plants, the natural world. So when we're doing any kind of a drawing and locating something, I have everybody put all these cardinal directions on, and put on where the sun rises and sets, the equinoxes, solstices, and all that, just so we have it, because that's really important in determining sustainability. And then secondly is the animal world. And there's a lot we can learn from the animal world in the communities, and the native people in your area can share a lot with you about that. And it helps in sustainable planning and design. It helps a lot. And we share the land with these animals, and we need to respect what they give us and what they share with us. And then the next one, the third one, is the spirit world. That's not church. It has to do with the spirit of places and creation and fire and smoke and cleanliness and understanding that goes about wild places. It's a unique thing. And then the last one, oh, this thing jumps ahead. The last one is really the important one, and that's our human world. And that deals with teaching and community and family and welcome and hospitality and respect and lots of other things. And so what I say is that, in rural, when you're dealing with rural people, ask and talk to them to share some of their four-world experiences. And I think you'll learn a lot from it. Now, the last one is just something that is called emerging gifts, and that has to do with this energy I was telling you about that's taking place here in Alaska and all over the lower 48. And it deals with something that I think is really important. Our ancestors in the Native communities passed on a lot of things to us, and they're traditional things, but they did not expect us to stand still, okay? Like my grandmother said, we expect you to understand and be respectful of our traditions and culture, but don't stand still, move forward. And I think that's what's going on in the communities right now. And here in Fairbanks, the last thing I'll show you is a project that Bettesworth North and our firm in Seattle and another medical firm was fortunate to work with the Tanana Chiefs. And it's the Andrew Isaac Clinic in Fairbanks. And one of the early things was sustainable. How do you make this thing sustainable in all kinds of categories, not just in energy, but in all kinds of categories? And so what we asked is that, well, can you assign us a cultural advisory group that could help as we move through the architecture and the engineering, that could help with us and give us guidance as we move through the project. And these are some of the people that were important people that were part of that advisory group, young and old, and they were wonderful. They helped us immensely throughout the entire project. And simple things like the doctors said, calm people down, would you? They come from 42 isolated villages, and they come in and they're sick and they're going to go to the doctor and they're tense. Do something to calm them down. Now, okay, play music, do something, give them something to read, give them some television. That was not what we focused on. What we focused on was providing a place that was familiar to them, that was welcoming, that had a lot of natural light. It wasn't a gymnasium room that you had to walk into, first of all. It was a living room situation. It was, helping them to calm down. Tracy from Bettesworth North and I were talking to one of the doctors a few weeks ago, and he said, it's been in operation now for a year, and he says, it works. 99% of the time it works. You calmed people down with some important, sustainable things, such as natural light. And But to get to that point, what we did is we talked a lot about the natural world, because they all come from, like down in the lower 48, most of us are not, we don't hunt and fish a lot for subsistence. And when we won the job a few years ago, we said, okay, good, okay, July we'll get going. And they said, oh, no, it's fishing season. And so, okay, August we'll get going. No, it's still fishing season. And we said, okay, September we'll really, no, it's moose season. And so we had to kind of adjust. And we got going, but we had to adjust to those things, understanding their natural cycles and what they were doing in their community. And then, if I can get back to it, then we also wanted to kind of like, what are the ages? What are the people like? Who are we working for? Who's our clients? Where do they live? What do they expect? And all that sort of thing. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that. And then we did this thing that, it's hard to read that, but I'll break it into smaller pieces. But this simple little thing was a great help to all of us in the design and the engineering and everything we did. And we call it a seasonal roundabout. And it was similar to the chart I just saw over in the solar panel, where they were saying it's part of the winter time you only get this much solar, and then in the summertime you get all of this solar. Well, that's what this chart was trying to do, but it brought in all the events and seasonal things that take place in the community. And I'll just show you just parts and pieces of it around, so you can just see where what was going on in communities that had family things, animal things, seasonal things, weather. And it was all in one chart. And we did this near the beginning as we started this project, because it helped us all understand where all these people came from and what they were doing. And where did it end up? Well, when you do a medical facility, you need lots of rooms for all kinds of things. And then you have the women's sections and the medical part and the dental part, and all of those things add up to a lot of rooms. And then you have sort of the public part of the project. And what we kind of went towards was something that was more organic in those public areas, and more comfortable for people to look out and see the environment. So I would suggest, if you have time, go over to the Andrew Isaac Center and look at the landscape. It just won some more awards for what it's doing, besides what the whole building's doing as a clinic. And it looks like this. Well, it's a modern building. It's a modern building. But look at those patterns that came from the designs that are woven into the materials and the vests and all that. They're in the solar control vertical panels that go around the sides of the building. Didn't cost a thing to do it. Those things were going to be there, and the manufacturer said, well, we'll put any pattern you want in there. So we were able to do that. And let's go back one more here if we can. I won't go back up. Anybody, can you get it to go back one more? Oh, well. Anyway, in closing, I thought this would be a little different than talking about, what you guys are getting every day, good stuff that you're learning and sharing with each other. I thought it would give you something a little different and maybe be helpful in working in the rural communities. And as Native people, it's a nice piece of weathered cedar. As Native people, we have woven our lives into the non-Native community of North America for over 500 years. And it's now time to reestablish our own identity and planning and design, and especially here in Alaska. And I plan myself to continue to be deeply invested in this reawakening that's taking place throughout all of North America. And we have many ancient, verbal, and emerging gifts that we can share with the world around us. And it might be helpful in solving some of our social, energy, and environmental problems. And I invite you, and I'm sure the communities that you're working for will invite you to stand inside our indigenous ways, not somewhere else, as you begin your journey working in these rural communities. So thank you.